You're listening to a classic edition of the Unknown Origins radio show here on the Paranormal UK network.
This is Nick Redfern, and you're listening to Unknown Origins Radio.
Welcome to Unknown Origins Radio.
And good evening, everybody. Welcome to another live edition of Unknown Origins Radio here on unknownoriginsradio.com. And we are also broadcasting live on TalkStream Live and JerseyTalkRadio.com, where you can watch the live video feed. I'm your host, Mark Johnson, and joining us down from their studios in Flemington at the Jersey Talk Radio studios, Mr. Bruce Pearson. How are you tonight, Bruce?
Excellent, Mark. Thanks. Good to be here. Great weather for a change, and looking forward to tonight's great. We've got some great guests, so I'm looking forward to a great show.
Yes, I'm really excited about this one. So we're going to get right to everything. First of all, we have to say hi to Irene Block, all the way over in the UK tonight. How you doing, Irene?
I'm doing fine. Sounds like it's going to be a good night tonight.
I think it will be. We just had a thunderstorm roll through here a little bit ago, so it just got me in that, electrified mood. So I'm all ready to go. Yeah, we're in a really weird period of time right now because everything that's going on here, especially in the United States, which thankfully you don't have to put up with, Irene. The political season, the presidential race season, it's getting crazier and crazier, and I just feel like the nuts have taken over the crazy house. It's a very unique time in our history, I think. I don't really think it's such a good thing, but it's definitely entertaining. Like watching a car wreck in process. So yeah, this is going to be an interesting next few months. Bruce, how was your week this week?
Very hectic. We're in the studio with Food Network. Just barely made it down here to the studio here in time. So it's keeping busy, but it's all good. Like I said, the weather's broken, so it's around 60 degrees, and that's all. We're thankful for that. But watching the festivities in the national election chaos is always entertaining, if not scary. So there's a lot going on. So it's all good.
And I want to mention that this is the second week now that, Irene, you've had also your new show that's also broadcasting on Dark Matter, and it just aired again tonight. Could you tell everybody a little bit about that?
Well, it's Paranormal Adventures UK, isn't it? We have fun. We talk about all the paranormal stuff. It's hard to talk about it because we've only done 2 shows at the moment. But, we've got a lot of things lined up and a lot of guests lined up and a lot of surprises lined up. But I don't want to ruin it by saying too much about it.
No.
That way, not the surprises.
Since I help out on that show, I'm privy to some of the surprises, and they're going to be a lot of fun coming up. But for people,
but we'll be going out for a drink and one thing or another, and finding a few spirits from bottles, won't we?
Pop on down to the pub and talk the paranormal. I think that could be a lot of fun. Just wanted to mention to everyone that you can hear Paranormal Adventures UK every Wednesday night on the Dark Matter Radio Network at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. But then in the UK, this week it's all messed up because you guys are behind us in the daylight savings time. So right now, tonight it aired at 10 o'clock. But once you catch up to us, then it'll be at 9 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time every week. So when do you catch up to us, by the way?
I've got no idea. I think a couple of weeks.
Oh, good Lord. Well, we'll make sure we post that. But you can listen to the show every week on Dark Matter, and then the podcast will be posted afterwards. And speaking of Dark Matter, while we are broadcasting live on Wednesdays on our website and on TalkStream Live, you can hear us. The repeat of tonight's show will be the next Monday on Dark Matter Digital Network at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, as we we're the lead-in show before Heather Wade and Midnight in the Desert. So A lot of great things happening, and I think we just want to get right into the show tonight. We have two guests that are joining us this evening, two authors who have come together to write a very new, unique book. One of them is somebody that I've really wanted to have on this program for many years, and I'm thrilled that he's able to come on and join us tonight. I want to introduce Mr. Whitley Strieber. How are you tonight, Whitley?
Fine, thank you.
And then I also want to introduce your co-author on the new book, Jeffrey Kripel. Jeff, I have to ask you, is that the correct way to say your name?
Well, no, we say Kripel.
Kripel, okay. That's my bad. I should have asked you before we came on the air tonight.
Right.
But I'll save it by calling you Jeff. But just give a little bit of background. Jeff is a professor of philosophy and religious thought and the former chair of the Department of Religious Studies at Rice University in Houston, Texas. And Whitley, of course, a lot of people know Whitley from his novels. He's written many novels over the years, three of which, I take that back, three of which have been turned into feature films. No, four. It counts going up in my head, Whitley, as we talk. But I have to mention that the Wolfen, one of my favorite films with Albert Finney, from the 80s. I always thought that was a brilliant movie and a brilliant adaptation of your book. But then you also, in 1980s, you wrote Communion, and really, for better or for worse, changed your own life and the life of many people who have read that book. So now tonight you both are on with this brand new book called The Supernatural. Whitley, could you tell us a little bit about what brought this book about?
Jeff brought it about.
Okay.
Jeff wanted... We sort of fell into the idea of doing it together, and Jeff was very enthusiastic about it. I really forget which one of us thought about it first, but in any case... Jeff has taken a serious interest in my work, and he is a very fine scholar and one of the few really serious scholars of modern mythology. And I've just found him terribly interesting to talk to for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is that he's quite open-minded in the sense of not believing, but rather being willing to entertain the question in a fairly sophisticated manner. And that's it started really with a discussion, a kind of ongoing discussion that began in about 2010?
Yeah, it was about 2010. I was writing Mutants and Mystics, so it must have been 2009, really. Must have been 2009.
Yeah, probably 2009 or 2010. And the discussion gradually turned into a book.
Now, the book is a very interesting take on a subject that, the paranormal or the supernatural or high strangeness and all these different strange things that happen to us, to mankind. I mean, we've been reporting strange encounters since the beginning of written history and before that with oral history for thousands and thousands of years. And yet we seem to have our own ideas, whether they're religious-based or culturally-based ideas of what we're dealing with in terms of the paranormal. And your approach to this book was to try to put a very brand new, unique perspective on that. And I was wondering if you could tell a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, is that a question for me or for Jeff?
Yeah.
Jeff, could you speak to that?
Yeah. Why don't you do it, Jeff?
Yeah. Whitley and I have been on a number of radio shows, and it really helps if you just tell us who you'd like to answer the question. So the book began really with my reading of Whitley's Visitor Corpus in 2009 and 2010, which began this long discussion. And we began to meet over the years and correspond at great length. And the basic idea was that the conversation around the supernatural or the paranormal has sort of split into two, schizophrenically split into those who take the phenomena quite literally and essentially believe it, and those who think it's all bunk. And we wanted to suggest that there's a third way, that you can take these experiences very seriously and as part of the real world, but you don't need to take them literally. You can interpret them as issuing from some other dimension of the natural world. So we called it the supernatural. That doesn't come through on radio very well, but that's 3 words, not 2. And the basic argument we wanted to advance, or at least suggest, was that these sorts of things are part of our real world. They're natural, but they're also super. They extend beyond any kind of normal experience of the world. So it's a way of shifting the conversation and trying to have a more nuanced conversation about these things.
One of the things that as myself as a self-proclaimed paranormal investigator, at least for the last 16 years, and the research I've done, is we mentioned it many times on this program, my differing and changing points of view and opinions on what really constitutes the paranormal, and I use air quotes when I say that, or the supernatural, because it's constantly changing. And Whitley, I have to give you a lot of credit in your books, because I started reading your books since Communion came out, and I read almost every single one that came out after that over years, read them several times. And there were times when you would mention concepts in there that I really struggled with. I really didn't understand. I really didn't know what to think about them. And then over time, my point of view has started coming around, and I have those epiphanies that I have a better understanding of it in terms of getting away from the idea that we're dealing with aliens from another planet, which seems to be what most of the nuts and bolts ufology groups look at these days, into something that's very, very strange. Trying to think of exactly how I want to phrase this. Just the encounters that you had, and you would go over a lot more different encounters in the new book, continue to seem to push the boundaries of what's out there. When you started writing Communion and the other books, did you find yourself holding back on a lot because you thought it was just going to be too strange and people wouldn't accept it?
How interesting that you would ask that question just now. I've been discussing that with Jeff today. Yes is the answer. I do hold back a lot and will continue to do so.
You had mentioned in the book there were a couple of instances that you actually came out and talked about for the first time, and I understand your hesitance of wanting to mention some of these experiences that you had because of the backlash or the giggle factor, as Bruce and I talk about, and the response and that the public, or the media, I should say, would have and retaliating against you. Because when you mentioned, the probes in your earlier things, and then, of course, people make fun of it, becomes a joke, and you took that very seriously, and that was very hurtful for you.
Well, it was, I shouldn't have, I tried to be discreet in the book, not realizing that I really shouldn't have put that in at all. I learned my lesson, and it's taken a long time. It took me 20 years to even say to my wife the word rape, that I had been raped. And the result of this was people were free to mock me for having been raped, and they did that a lot on the television, on the radio, in every venue you can possibly imagine. Even it became even a kind of a comedy meme with comedians and that one of those television shows, animated television shows. I forget which one it was.
South Park?
Yeah, South Park.
South Park, yeah, exactly. I'm sorry, but I don't ever watch them, and I'm not very interested in them. But it became sort of it was something that I had to deal with, and it became very personal, because whenever I appeared anywhere, even in a private situation with friends, I could see the laughter in their faces. They were aching to burst out into laughter about it. It was agonizing, because being raped is hard. It's difficult. It's a tremendous emotional challenge. And to add this to it was grotesque. It was really difficult, and especially because I am not absolutely sure to this day precisely what happened.
Now, when you had your first experiences back in December of 1985, at the time it happened, that moment you thought it was something so strange and beyond anything you could have imagined. You had no idea that this has been happening to you most of your life.
It was a surprise to me when I was with Dr. Donald Klein, who was a fascinating man. He had interviewed many people and used hypnosis to help them gain memory of experiences such as trauma that was associated with crimes, hit and run accidents, and so forth, and had actually solved many cases this way. So there was little question in my mind that his techniques were effective in drawing forth memory, not imagination. And at the time, he was introduced to me by a UFO investigator, Bud Hopkins, and I have to admit that both Dr. Klein and myself were laughing up our sleeves at Bud Hopkins's what we regarded as a pretty unsophisticated conviction about alien abduction. And then I had the hypnosis, and what came to me under hypnosis was frankly appalling. I still, to this day, don't understand it. And not only that, about a year later, after Communion was published, a rather shamefaced neighbor of mine told me that he had been actually driving home from a party that night and had seen in a field near our houses in upstate New York a gray object, and he was a retired state policeman, and he felt he should stop and render aid because it looked to him like a blimp had descended into the field in the middle of the night, and obviously that would be an accident of some kind. So he stopped and got out and climbed over the fence and began walking toward it. He heard humans screaming from inside and began running then. Suddenly lights turned on all over it, and it made a growling sound and came toward him across the field. And his wife became panicky back in the car and began to scream. And he ran and got into the car and drove away. And then he came across, actually, we talked about what had happened to me a few weeks afterwards, because at the time I wanted to find out, I thought I had been the victim of a crime. And I wanted his advice as to who in the police, in the state police, I should go to, or the sheriff's department, to talk about this. It wasn't until I never actually did that, because during the course of my own investigations, it became obvious that this was, if it was a crime, it was no ordinary crime. And he was very ashamed of not having said what he had seen when I talked to him, because he thought it was connected in some way. And I don't to this day know if it was or not. Maybe it was simply a UFO and I was inside it, and all of the things I remember are absolute physical facts. But I can't get away from the fact that even if that is true, other things that are more important must also be true. And that was where Jeff comes in.
Well, I'd like to jump in here if I may. And I think it's important after, 40-some years of investigating this community in its larger sense, rather than, starting in, Unexplained Phenomena down in Roswell in 1976 when I was working down there in college. Whitney, if you'll indulge me, I think it strikes me all the time as a documentary producer, the real human side, and I mean this in the most literal sense, of the toll that these type of events have on people. I think that I always ask people when I lecture to try to put themselves in the mindset of someone whose life is completely and irreversibly turned upside down. And I think your experiences are an extreme case that evidences the trauma and the agony and the pain as a victim. I mean, I don't know any other way you could describe it in your case. But I think if people try to picture how life-altering these episodes are, and even to the extent from a professional level, as you say, the state trooper. I mean, I've gone all over the world doing aviation documentaries, and what I've been told behind the scenes by commercial pilots and military pilots and law enforcement personnel and people that have said, look, I could never say this, but I'll never look at things the same again. I think it's very important, and I must applaud. I mean, all the humiliation that you've had to endure, things that you just elaborated, and many, many more that we would never need to know about, nor should we, is just an amazing burden to carry. And for you to go public on this and stand your ground and remain steadfast. And, I have been fortunate to read Communion in the books and do a lot of research. And certainly I know Linda and have listened to many of your interviews. And so I am at least acquainted to publicly what you've had to share with people and to bare your soul for the sake of bringing this information forward, because it's incredibly important that people realize that sincere, intelligent people like yourself are willing to put yourself on the line and bear this this kind of humiliation with people that are less than professional in their approach to get this information out. And I want to just, if I may, real quickly bring up another point. We've been working with a gentleman that I've known since my childhood, who ironically just in 1994, Mark Reed published his book, and certainly we're not about him tonight, but the concept of supernormal events, supernatural, and the concept that maybe all of these type of unexplained phenomena have some type of link that we're just now at least evaluating, if not corroborating, I think is a very interesting and fascinating turn of bringing together the nuts and bolts people, and I tend in general to be one of those people, being a pilot, but also the paranormal aspects that don't lend themselves to the nuts and bolts research. So forgive me for this long-winded introduction, but I think I really respect anyone who has gone through what you have to bring forth something that would be very easy to say, I will never talk to anybody about this, for so many valid reasons. So I think you're to be applauded for that, and your work stands on its own merit. So let me let you go back and respond to that, either of you gentlemen.
Well, okay, I'll respond first. My interest in this is, what can I get from it, from the contact experience? What is in it for me? And the negative side of it is there. And we go through that extensively in Supernatural, and I've never shrunk from talking about it, because the business of aliens here, wonderful from somewhere and coming in, and if only the government would quit shooting at them, they'd give us plans for a starship or whatever, or spiritual growth. That's not on in my mind. It's not what's happening. Neither, however, is this anger that people get, and where they end up sitting passively angry and unable to really make anything out of this for themselves. When I realized there was very definitely something extremely strange happening in my life, and it was out in the woods, I went out into the woods in the night alone, night after night after night. When I first started doing it, putting one foot in front of the other took actual concentration. It wasn't something, my body didn't just walk. I had to literally lift my legs and do it. It was like walking into a lair of panthers, but I did it. And I have been doing it ever since. I still do it. I'm still involved. It's not over. And what started as a ferociously difficult experience has become an illumination of the deepest and most profound sort. And Jeff, why don't you talk a little bit about the dangerous sacred? You know so much about that.
Yeah, I mean, before I talk about the sacred, if I could just comment on what's been said, I think the way Whitley has been shamed and humiliated by these cultural forces, I think that in itself needs to be interrogated. I think really what's at stake here is our view of reality itself. And Whitley's experiences, like many, many, many other people's experiences, are direct challenges or subversions, really, of what our Western culture assumes to be a rather full and complete picture of reality. So when someone like Whitley stands up and actually describes something that can't be fit into that, the system, as it were, has a kind of immunological response, and it attacks the perceived virus, as it were, and surrounds it, and in this case makes fun of it. So I think that's really very much worth keeping in mind, that what we're really talking when we're talking about the shaming practices is a kind of immunological response from a social body, the perceived virus, as it were. And so, in terms of the left-handed sacred, the sacred is a basic category in the study of religion. And by the sacred, we do not mean the good or the ethical or the moral. We mean the holy. We mean some kind of awesome energy or presence in the environment that can kill one as easily as it can fascinate or allure one. So the sacred has a positive quality, but it also has a profoundly negative quality. Human beings historically have been as afraid of the sacred as they have been drawn to it. So this, again, I think helps us understand Whitley's experiences. They can be terrifying, and they can still be genuine encounters with something very, very real. So I hope that helps.
And Jeffrey, I I totally agree with you. And again, that's another reason that I really fell in love with this book, is because of these ideas and looking at things, trying to break out of our traditional Western ideas of these types of strange events, getting away from the labels that we put on things, and having everything all neatly packaged. Because when doing so, we don't think. Basically, I mean, in a nutshell, we stop thinking and we use our labels and we go, okay, I understand that. Sure, they're aliens coming from the Zeta Reticuli. Okay, that makes sense to most people. But what's really happening seems to be so much more wondrous and terrifying and beyond our comprehension in most ways. I have to say, and this is one of the things that really got me, Whitley, with reading your books over the years and coming to a better understanding. And we've had a wonderful opportunity on this program to interview and speak with people who've had similar experiences to yours. And they all have gone through both the very negative in terms of how the media and society reacts to them, but there's the truth that's in those words, that I think it's that truth that's what's really terrifying for most people, because it shatters their illusions of what we think of as reality. And I've always felt that reality as we know it is a complete illusion. There's much more out there that we have to open our minds to, but it's going to take some time before we can even get there. Whitley, you mentioned when you talked about going out into the woods and the fear that you felt and the absolute terror and taking that step, one step at a time. There's a concept that I've been hearing from people who've had these types of experiences. Do you feel that these visitors, these beings, manipulate emotions and can manipulate terror in a person as a form of control?
Well, it's always possible. We don't know what they are or what their capabilities are. So I would say this. I have observed at my cabin instances where when a person who was engaged in an encounter felt fear, there was a response that is suggested that the being or whatever it was that was there was reacting defensively. And here's what I mean. There was a filmmaker there. We were trying to get video of the visitors, and they had showed up that night and gone to the rooms of numerous, a number of three different people. And then the filmmaker woke up at about 4 o'clock in the morning, and there, standing beside his bed, was a small figure with a very large head looking down at him. And he was a Hollywood filmmaker. He didn't believe any of this. He was doing this for money. And he was, of course, appalled and horrified. And he said, an electric shock of terror went through me like nothing I have ever known before in my life. And immediately, the figure's head became the head of a hawk, of Horus. Sort of like what happens when a blowfish becomes concerned about something in its environment. It suddenly blows up and becomes a big spiky thing, and to scare off whatever is there. And yet at the same time, the head of Horus has a profound mythological significance as well. So it was much more complex than simply a fright response on the part of whatever was there. Then the thing disappeared before his eyes, and he woke his wife up, and they were too scared to get out of the bed. But let's put it this way, they left that afternoon, never to return.
I can imagine.
Which I can well understand. He said to me at one point, "How can you live here?" And I said, we're doing this. My wife and I have decided that we will do this. That's why we're here.
The experiences you've had beyond just the visitor interactions, it forced you, or at least opened a door for you. You started with learning meditation, and even had experiences with going out of your own body. And even the experiences of being with the visitors, where you talked about meeting and interacting with people who had died.
Oh, yeah. I go out of my body all the time. I am extensively involved with the other side, but I'm not talking about it much because I just don't want to.
Understood. Because let me just say this part then, because I've always felt that there was a connection between these visitors, these beings. There's more of a connection with the paranormal, as in layman terms, as most people think of, and the afterlife than we realize with these higher beings, which makes me lean towards that this is more of and I'm not even sure the terminology is correct, an interdimensional experience, a entered reality experience, where we are on one reality right now, and there's so much of the universe that's happening on other realities, whether they occupy the same space as us, as is mentioned in string theory and talking about other dimensions. And so what we think of someone died and going to the spirit world, well, maybe that spirit world isn't so much in our minds like the spirit world. That's the only way we could describe it, but being just another plane of existence where maybe these visitors, or at least part of these visitors, that's their normal everyday reality. And they're coming in and interacting with us. And it's much more entwined and interconnected than we want to admit. Would you say? Well,
certainly when you're in that reality, it feels very ordinary, and the denizens of that reality aren't particularly amazed by it.
Do you feel that any of the entities, these beings that you've interacted with, do you feel like they are coming from a different reality, or do you feel maybe you're also dealing with something that's very physical, that's part of our world? I know you've had encounters that involved human beings as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, this different reality thing is very difficult not to untangle because of the way our language works. If the first thing you find out is that there are other ways of doing language that have absolutely nothing to do with words as we understand it. And let me explain what I mean. A perfect example is on the cover of our book, on the cover of Supernatural, the eye of an owl. Why is it there? It's because the visitors are telling us about themselves through the imagery of the owl. When I had my first experience, the first thing I thought the next morning was an owl had gotten into the house. And one of the most terrifying moments of my life was that evening when I walked upstairs. By that time, I knew no owl could have gotten into the house, so I had decided it must have looked in the window of the bedroom. And I had seen it, and that had been the cause of the strange memories that I was coping with already that next afternoon. And I knew as I was walking up the stairs that I wouldn't see any footprints of any owl in the snow on the windowsill. I already knew that. And I looked, and there were no footprints and no claw prints, and then the sun went down. Now, if you look at the life of an owl, or if you study the owl and what it does and how it lives and the mythology of the owl, you are studying the visitors in a entirely different way than we would normally study them using language and describing things back and forth in words. And what I'm saying here is that to try to talk about this as interdimensional, it feels like we're saying that there's some kind of a door between kind of this room and the other room, which is another dimension, and they're in that room and we're in this room. There are no rooms. There are gradients of experience and orientations of being. And we have a particular orientation of being that has a great weight connected with it that keeps us moving down this particular path. But when you get off of this path, you see that it's one garden and full of many paths. The garden, what physicist I forget used to call it the garden of forked paths. That's what it is. And it's not there is only one home for consciousness. It is reality it's the whole spectrum of reality. You know, the best language I've ever found, and I wish we still used it to contend with this, is ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. And the reason is that they are so filled with both contextual meanings like English and logical structure like modern languages, but also with resonances from mythology and from the natural world that cause every single hieroglyphic to be a complex array of meanings, implications, and wonderful visual, oral, and textural puns. It's a bigger language than we use now, and we need a bigger language to deal with this. Our great problem, we do not have the language to address this. But we can find that language because they have it. And when you get involved with them, you really let them into your life, you're soon speaking another language completely. A better language, a much better language. You know, I was with them once for, it couldn't have been about 20 minutes when I was totally involved. And I was in my apartment in San Antonio and walking out on the street with them, but I was in their field, as it were. I was sort of in their reality. And that apartment, it was fascinating the way it changed when I was seeing it as if through their eyes. And it reminded me of what it's like to look at a little burrow in a zoo where you go in and there's the dark room where they have the little burrowing night creatures, and you look and you can see their burrows behind glass, and you look and you think, oh gosh, look at that messy little burrow. And of course it's full of all kinds of debris and filth and fleas and everything, but they love it. They're happy there. My apartment became a disjointed kind of crazy house. I could see every flaw and defect in it. It was incredible. And I thought, my God, this looks like like the lair of an animal. And that was how they saw it and how they saw me. And I became all big and thick and heavy. It was an extraordinary experience. But then came, when it ended, that morning at about 7 o'clock, the radio turned itself on, because we used to wake up with the radio. And I heard this strange, garbled yapping. And I couldn't figure out what it was coming from. It sounded like a very brilliant dog talking, almost trying to talk. And I thought, my God, that's coming out of the radio. And then I realized, that's English. I've lost my language by being with them for 15 or 20 minutes. I've lost my language. Gradually, it came back. But without a new way of addressing this linguistically, we're not really going to get anywhere. We're going in circles right now. But supernatural does offer that possibility. It definitely does. If you look at the book, especially in Jeff's part, he says, make the cut. Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about that? Make the cut. It's so important.
Yeah, so this comes actually from a sentence that Whitley uses in the chapter before that, where he essentially says, well, I don't know what was there. I'm describing what I experienced, what I saw. I'm not making a claim about what caused it or what was there. And in the study of religion, that's what we call it phenomenology, where you focus on the experience, on what is appearing to a particular subject or psyche, but you bracket the question of who's producing it or where it's coming from. And that then allows you to look at any experience, no matter how extreme or how extravagant, and take it on its own terms and try to understand it. And then later, you can ask those questions about where it comes from or what caused it. But to begin with, you have to make that cut. And you have to, in other words, you have to make a distinction between what a person is seeing or experiencing and what is actually there, which might be entirely different things. Each of us, every moment of our waking lives, is essentially watching a 3D movie inside our brain. But that 3D movie is being created as much by our brains and our bodies as it is whatever is out there, streaming in, as it were. So this is just 101 in trying to understand someone else's experiences, whether they're religious or spiritual or paranormal, whatever they are. So that's what we mean by making the cut.
It seems like a lot of it is a matter of perception and what we are able to perceive with our limited brains, our limited intelligence, compared to what the totality of reality.
We assume, Mark, that for some bizarre reason that our senses are set up to perceive all of reality exactly as it is. And that's just nonsense. It's just not true. Our senses evolved over countless eons so that we could survive in this physical environment. And so they're locked in to only a tiny, tiny sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum. We only see a fraction of what's actually out there. And then this then enters our language. This is Whitley's point. So we say, oh, that made sense, or this makes sense. Well, what we mean by that is I can coordinate that with what I see with my eyes and hear with my ears and smell with my nose. It literally makes sense. The problem is that, again, what makes sense is just a sliver of reality, and the rest of it doesn't coordinate with our senses at all. I mean, anybody who's spent 5 minutes trying to read, say, a layman's book on quantum physics knows that it makes absolutely no sense. But they're claiming to be mapping reality as it is. So I think that's the problem. It's a problem of language. It's a problem of our senses. It's a problem of our cognitive capacities, none of which are set up to really deal with these things.
Well, we are having trouble dealing with the most basic of the supernatural questions. Here's one. Quantum indeterminacy. We know and can prove that a particle will remain in superposition until it's observed. When it becomes positional, it focuses into a particle. What does that mean about us? What does that mean about the universe in which we live? And as Jeff has been saying, we don't actually know. But that moment when the observer changes the world by merely doing the observing is a moment of the supernatural, because we don't know what is happening to cause that to occur. But something in the outside world changes and in effect becomes real because it's being observed. And it's an experiment that's been done dozens, thousands of times. It is reality. But we don't want to address it philosophically. And certainly most of the sciences outside of physics don't want to address it because they are the media. God, the intellectual community hates that. They will never address it because they want everything to be linear and comprehensible. The intellectual community is still living in the 18th century. They look at the world as a Newtonian construct, and even these linear histories that we write are themselves a kind of illusion. We live in an enforced illusion, in fact, very different from the reality. Because here's a question about reality. Why is it that it appears that it stays this way all the time, even when we're not observing it? Who is observing it? Or is it that we can never escape from the obligation of the observer, the position of the observer? We can never see outside of observation itself. Therefore, we can never see reality as it actually is. Who knows what's actually happening? We don't have the faintest idea. We can only respond to what we see. And as Jeff says, our senses are extremely limited. We have very limited senses. We have machines that can take our understanding or our vision into areas that our bodies and brains are not capable of seeing. But here's something else. One of the things that could happen at our cabin was that there could be these very complex experiences and interactions that were both physical and quasi-physical. And the cabin itself was located on an iron tailing. A massive amount of iron was under the iron formation, geologic formation was under the area where that cabin was. And about 20 miles to the south, there was a place called Magnetic Mine Road, where the iron in that part of the tailing was actually magnetized. And people used to go out to Magnetic Mine Road to watch orbs of light that seemed to have an intelligence that would come up and would be face to face with you and then move off. What was going on? We have no idea. And then in the same area, quite a number of homeless people, I am told, and I've never been able to follow this up, so it's not confirmable, died in very bizarre ways that were similar to cattle mutilations. So what in the world was going on? That was happening to them while I was having what came to be extraordinary and sublime and deeply illuminating experiences with the visitors. What a mystery. You know, this is all about one thing: perfecting the question. That's what Supernatural, our book, is about. But first, we have to accept it. And that's hard for us. We don't want the question to be there. We'd much rather giggle about rectal probes.
Or have everything spoon-fed to us. And this goes to a concept that, we've discussed many times in the show of almost a dumbing down of society. Instead of becoming more enlightened and trying to expand our consciousness to understand these things. It almost feels like the new Dark Ages, where, you know, the powers that be are purposely trying to dumb us down, to don't look at that man behind the curtain, to pay
Donald Trump. I love the uneducated. That's what it's about, isn't it? They love the uneducated. That's why we're watching our public school systems disintegrate all around the country. Because the powers that be, as you put it, do not want an educated public. That's exactly what they don't want.
No, because if they did, there would be another revolution, because people would finally stand up and not put up with what our society has become. You know, it's keep people uneducated, keep the masses, you know, going and consuming, and they make their money, and they have the
keep
power.
them dumb and keep them scared.
Yep.
Then you got them.
That's why, you know, I don't even try to watch the mainstream news anymore, because if you really break down the content, and being a past filmmaker, and I'm going to college and filmmaking classes and media classes, you know, one thing that I learned real quick is when you try to break down a nightly newscast, and you find out in an hour newscast, you might have maybe 7 minutes of news, of real news, if you're lucky. And the rest between advertising and fluff pieces, you know, personal interest stories, there's nothing there, and it's disheartening to what has been happening. What I think we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take our break, and then when we come back, we'll be talking more with Whitley Strieber and Jeffrey Kripel, and about their book, The Supernatural. And we'll be right back after these messages, so don't go away.
Demons Dwell, The Tower, is a thrilling novel of supernatural terror by Irene Block and Mark Johnson. A hidden evil torments a young couple in a small Italian village along the Mediterranean coast and threatens to destroy their once peaceful lives. As the dark forces close in around them, hope arrives in the form of two paranormal investigators. Using their psychic abilities and research experience, the pair quickly finds themselves embroiled in a 100-year-old mystery involving satanic cults and terrifying entities. As they confront the evil forces around them, the investigators are drawn further into the dark and mysterious world hidden beneath the seeming tranquility of an ancient Italian village. Demons Dwell, The Tower, is now available on GlanetTie.com, Amazon.com, and BarnesandNoble.com.
Hi, this is Jeff Brady, host of In Other News, heard on Dark Matter Radio on Thursdays. In this strange period where free energy technology is weaponized, dissent is criminalized, and war economies flourish, the human family is being deliberately assaulted on multiple fronts, in the food, air, water, and during sleep. Yet here we are with information at our fingertips, only to become a slave to the portable digital communication device. You know what you're really communicating? You're screaming to cell phone corporations, please put a chip in me. Past shows have looked at issues involving electromagnetic weapons, satellite stalking, RFID, orgone and orgonite, illegal fluoridated drinking water for infants, airport radiation scanners, secret societies, energy vampires, psychopathy, surveillance, sex trafficking, disaster capitalism. So tune in to In Other News, Thursdays on the Dark Matter Radio Network, the pioneers of overnight talk radio.
Did you ever turn to your radio for your favorite talk show to find that it's been preempted for this?
In the air, to deep right center. Back goes Lewis to the wall. And it's out of here!
Or this?
And I'm ashamed of you, Hillary, for voting for it.
Do you have a favorite talk radio program that's not available in your city? Just go to TalkStreamLive.com for links to the best streaming talk radio shows. At TalkStream Live, you will find live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All your favorites are here. With such a large selection, you will also discover some new favorites. On the go and still want to listen? With the mobile smartphone, simply type TalkStream Live on your internet browser. Now you can take internet internet radio with you. You will also find news and sports streams. Best of all, the TalkStream Live directory is free and there's never a login required. Remember TalkStreamLive.com, the fastest route between you and your favorite talk radio show.
Glenattai Publishing is pleased to announce the release of Stephen Jansen's latest novel, Ghost Tactical, The Labyrinth of Daedalus. The Labyrinth of Daedalus tells the story of Trent Ruck, a member of an elite ghost tactical team who acquires some of the most top-secret military aircraft ever developed. Trent is assigned to steal a high-tech aircraft fitted with the state-of-the-art A-Drive, a top-secret technology that allows the pilot to transcend the very fabric of space and time. Trent finds himself in a race to keep the A-Drive out of the hands of other organizations who plan to use the technology for their own sinister agendas, which threatens the very fabric of our existence. The first book in the Ghost Tactical series, The Labyrinth of Daedalus, is an exciting novel that will thrill lovers of science fiction and high-tech adventures. Ghost Tactical, The Labyrinth of Daedalus, is now available on Glenattai.com, Amazon.com, and BarnesandNoble.com. And welcome back, everyone, to Unknown Origins Radio. I'm Mark Johnson, along with Bruce Pearson and Irene Block. And we are talking tonight with our guests Whitley Strieber and Jeffrey Kripel about their new book, The Supernatural. Irene, do you have any thoughts on this so far?
No, I'm just fascinated with listening to the story of everything that's gone on with Whitley. You know, for me, this is all new over here. We don't hear so much of it. So I'm definitely going to be buying the book, I think.
While we're waiting, I know Bruce wanted to ask a question when he gets back on, but let me ask you a question, Whitley. Something else that you brought up in the new book with the supernatural, and then on that, I'd like to get Jeff's take on it afterwards. Whitley, you had mentioned in your book about some of your out-of-body experiences that you had, and there was one time where you had an out-of-body experience and then you looked at yourself and you seemed to take on a visage of one of the visitors.
That happened. It wasn't more than taking on the visage of one of the visitors. I was that afternoon, I was sitting and lying on a couch, and Anne was sitting there reading. And I realized I felt a certain type of vibration that you feel when you're going to have an out-of-body experience. But then I suddenly realized, and I don't know quite why this was, that it wasn't going to be an out-of-body experience, that I was going to change forms. And I thought to myself, well, she's going to see an alien now for sure, finally. Then the cat jumped up on me, and sparks shot off of my chest onto the cat, and the cat yowled and jumped away, but it also threw the whole thing off balance, so nothing happened. That night, we went to bed, and it happened in the night, and the transformation then took place. And so I got out of the bed, and in this other state, it's possible you can do a lot of things, like you're not quite connected to gravity in the same way. So I went flying upstairs, and not flying, but sort of moving very easily, let me put it that way, into my son's room where he and a friend were asleep, and he was having a sleepover. I thought perhaps I wanted to somehow engage with him, because he was very negative about this, and didn't want it in his life, and didn't want to be talked about or anything. But then when I was in there, he was asleep and the other boy was awake, and he looked up at me, the other boy, and smiled. He's a big smile on his face, and I thought, oh, good. They're accepting this. But then I won't go into what happened next, but suffice to say I had to leave the room. And the experience then changed the energy changed, and I became this form again. The next morning at breakfast, the boys were very sullen and silent, and they went away to school. Then when Andrew came home, he said, "Dad, one of those things came into my room last night and disturbed X." The boy scared him. "I don't want you to let them come anywhere near me or anyone I know, because it ruins my friendships." And I realized that my son apparently didn't really know me all that well after all. But he subsequently realized that Dad is just really strange, and it's okay. He's not strange. He's fine.
See, there's something that really struck me when I read that in the book, and it's when you look at Native American lore, especially in the Southwest, and they have the talk of skinwalkers or being able in pagan mythology of shapeshifting into different forms, which sounds, modern science, and most people poo-poo that as fantasy mythology can't exist, but yet there just seems to be an evidence out there that there are aspects of reality that do make it a reality, that it can happen, whether it's a manipulation of energies, whether I don't know, it's beyond my comprehension, but the fact remains it seems to happen. Do you feel it could have been a similar situation?
Well, I can't do it. Mm-hmm. It has to be done to me. In other words, I can't change form at will. I've tried. And unless somebody comes and does it, it's just not going to happen, as far as I can tell. Though I'm still working on it. If I can change form, I'm going to damn well go down the street in the other form the next time I do it, see what people think. But there are people with extraordinary abilities and powers. I've seen a lot of that, and in all of the communities that are still connected in a real way to this planet, those powers are ordinary. In the communities that aren't, they seem impossible. They seem completely impossible. But they're very, very much part of us. You have to be a child of the planet, not a bride or husband of the planet, not a divorcee, in order to enjoy your real self. And these people can. Yes, they can shift into different forms. Of course they can. I can. I'd love to shift into a really cool form like an eagle. But so far, no cigar. It's just that one form, and I haven't been able to do it on call. Wish I could.
Bruce, are you there?
Speaking of interdimensional travel,
yeah,
we have to accept the fact that he's there and not.
He can hear us. He can hear himself, but for whatever reason, his audio's not coming through. So
why don't we talk about him?
Pardon?
Why don't we talk about him?
Yeah, let's talk about Bruce now. Now he can't defend himself. No, Irene, you want to throw in some barbs?
That's cruel.
Well, we're waiting. We'll try to Bruce. Let me kick you out, and I'll try to bring you back in. Let's see if this fixes. See, there's another concept that it kind of ties in with all this, and I brought it up a couple of times tonight, and I don't know how much you're willing to talk about it or not. Dr. John Mack, when he was doing his research and doing hypnotherapy and regressions on his patients, and Dolores Cannon also used this technique. And in a lot of the cases, and I lean towards Dr. Mack's more because they talk about Dr. Mack and in several of his cases that he investigated, they had mentioned going back further beyond this life and mentioning that they were these beings. They were among these beings. They were part of these beings that had mentioned
It's not that they were part of these beings. It's that these beings are part of us.
Then
it's just us.
Then that's the question.
Us. And it doesn't, the whole alien human thing is it's an illusion. It's not even real. There are no aliens. I mean, we're all together. It's one consciousness.
This is exactly what I wanted to try and explain earlier when I wrote you that message, Mark, but I couldn't find the words for it. Thank you very much. You've said it.
So we're all one and together. Now let me see if I can, my little puny human brain here, try to wrap around this. If we're all one and together between us, these visitors, these intelligences, we're all one. I guess that means we're all coming from the same place. We're all part of the same thing. How does that we relate to, let's say, other forms of life here on this planet with animals, insects, bacteria? Is that all part of the same thing, just in different forms? And maybe Whitley, I don't know if you would answer that, or maybe that would be something for Jeffrey to answer.
Address that.
Well, that's not fair. But I want to go back to Whitley's comment. I mean, when you initially invoked the story of Whitley watching himself turn into an alien, I mean, obviously the first reading of that should be that the alien is us, that the whole abduction experience is some part of us that we've repressed and lost touch with in the modern world, that wants our attention and has to go to extreme measures to get our attention. And the human being is vast. What the ego is just a tip of the iceberg above the water, but there's this immense psyche or soul or spirit underneath the water, as it were. And Whitley, he signaled this on the very first page of Communion. Nobody noticed, but he gave away his deepest insight on page 1, and he did it again on page 1 of our book. The phrase is, the enigmatic presence of the human mind winks back from the dark. I mean, that's precisely what he was suggesting there. And that's really kind of what we pursue in the book again. We really go after that idea that the mythical figure of the alien is in fact some other part of the human that we've lost touch with, or that we're still groping toward. So I just think that's true. I think the one thing we know about every abduction experience that anybody's ever reported is that it was a human experience. It was a human being who had that experience. Whether it has some objective cause again, we don't know, but we know at the end of the day it was a human being having that experience. So that's significant, and it suggests that it has something to do with our humanity, us.
What do you think of the idea, Whitley, of the idea that some people have claimed that these beings not only are us, but are possibly us from the future?
Well, that's a very interesting question. My wife, Anne, was very interested in that possibility always. She always felt like this might be something from our own future. And interestingly enough, there are two principles of physics that pertain here that suggest that could be true. The first one, of course, is the grandfather paradox. And we know it works because we have moved photons backwards in time in such a way that they should encounter themselves, and they never do. They never do. In other words, the grandfather paradox is true. You can't go back in time and kill your own grandfather. Something else will happen. However, we also know that movement through time is theoretically possible. It's a daunting task physically, but it is theoretically possible. There's another principle, the principle of least action, that tells us, this is the principle that says that nothing ever does anything in nature that it doesn't need to do. In other words, in nature never expends any more energy on anything than it must. In other words, water trickling down a stream never stops to regard the view. It just goes down always to the lowest possible point. That's the principle of least action. That same principle means that it is possible to travel backwards in time, because the principle of least action ensures that the grandfather paradox cannot be broken. So there's no bar to doing it in physics. The only bar to doing it is essentially technological. Now, it seems quite possible that either we or somebody else may have solved that technological problem, and that may be an explanation for why there is among the close encounter community an almost universal message of environmental peril. And it might be that these people are coming back in time to try to repair their present by changing our present. And, they might be succeeding, because just in the past year, for the first time, despite economic growth around the world, modest economic growth, carbon emissions remained flat for the first time in 40 years because of efforts being made to control carbon dioxide emissions. Now, so maybe they are having an effect, but I don't know. The interesting thing is, though, that if someone were to come back in time, they might give themselves more latitude to be able to violate the temporal restrictions if they appeared to us to be something that wasn't real. Aliens, for example. Then they might be able to do more and communicate with us more fully. So it's a fascinating possibility. I don't think it's out of bounds at all.
It's, to my understanding, at least this is the way I'm leaning with a lot of the people that I've talked to and gaining more of an understanding and knowledge in regards to time, that our concept of time being linear is of course just an illusion. Time is not linear. All time is happening at once, but time also seems to be fluid. A perfect example is, you've mentioned this before in your books and even on An Unknown Country, your website, about having, whether it was, I forget the exact term, whether visions or whatnot, where you seeing yourself in almost multiple realities, or multiple different versions of you, different time, that's not what happened in your present, but could have happened, or maybe is playing out in another time frame or another reality.
Well, that happened in December of 2009, as I recall. And it was associated in my mind with a really high intensity experience, an encounter. And my consciousness moved into an array of different lives, all at the same time. And it was a remarkable experience, and it came, ironically enough, the day of the publication of my book 2012, which was a sort of kind of comic novel about a writer who it turns out that the book he's writing is creating reality in a parallel universe. And he gets into a lot of trouble with the people in that universe because some of them want him to write one thing and others want him to write another. And he is caught between two stools, as it were. In any case, it was an absolutely fascinating experience. And, you know, it's quite possible that we are moving down many, if the Copenhagen interpretation is true, then my seeing 6 or 7 different lives was paltry compared to what's really going on. There could be thousands.
Oh, God. I don't want to... there's already 2 of me. I have an identical twin brother on the West Coast. So there's already 2 of me. The thought that there's like maybe thousands or millions or billions of me floating around out there, that's rather frightening. Let me ask you this. In terms of time, or traveling through time, time seems not only fluid, but it seems like we occasionally seem to experience time edits. And I know you've had Starfire Tour on your Dreamland show many times, and talking about certain edits within the timeline. And a perfect example would be when somebody remembers, they have a vivid memory of a celebrity dying. Perfect example would be, I know a lot of people remember when Kirk Douglas supposedly died many years ago. Well, Kirk Douglas is very much alive, and yet there are people there who have that memory of Kirk Douglas dying, of Michael Douglas and his wife Catherine Zeta-Jones at the funeral, and this all happened many years ago. And then all of a sudden, boom, he pops up, he's still alive, and he's still here with us. And yet people still have those memories, and it seems like time itself has altered some. So in terms of the grandfather paradox, could that maybe not be true, only in terms of, because time is fluid, we're only remembering one aspect of a timeline. There could be multiple timelines, or there could be edits in the timeline, and our memories of that timeline is affected along the way based on our limited physical perception using, these meat suits in our brains.
Well, Ann and I were at a place in L.A. called the Magic Castle, appropriately enough, where magicians go and... I've been there. Yeah, it's a lovely place. They go and do their magic acts, and there's millions of little rooms here and there. And she and Starfire experienced a time slip together, where somebody who wasn't in a bathroom with them, in the ladies' room with them, a woman, walked out of the ladies' room in front of them, even though the ladies' room, only Starfire and Ann had been in the ladies' room. I was waiting right outside the door because the place was so complicated, and Annie had a tendency to get lost in places like that. I was just a few feet away. I had seen the 2 of them go in, and I saw the woman come out kind of oddly right in front of them and then walk away. And Anne came out and said, "Who was that?" And I said, "I don't know. Why?" She said, "Because there wasn't anyone in the bathroom but us, and yet she walked out in front of us. Did you see her?" I said, "Yeah, I saw her. We found her. She was the photographer who was working, during the photographs of people and stuff in there. And she hadn't noticed anything unusual. But the problem is it's a very small bathroom. There were 2 stalls and a sink, and there was no place for a third person to be. And yet she was there. She sort of popped up out of nowhere. And she didn't perceive anything unusual, but Ann and Starfire certainly did, because, she suddenly left the bathroom in front of them when she couldn't have been in it. It was really a cool experience, I have to tell you.
There are a couple, and again, you have to take this with a grain of salt only because of what can be done with video editing these days, but there are a couple of very intriguing videos that can be found on YouTube that seem to show something extremely similar to that happening. There's one, I believe it was in Ireland, it shows these band members on the street and they're putting their equipment away, and the way one band member, he's sitting there, and from behind his back, all of a sudden this man with a bicycle comes as if he went right behind him. But yet you could see the full man. He wasn't in on the other side. It's like he literally came out of nowhere and went right behind the man pedaling down the street. There's a couple of other examples of that can be seen out there. That's the one that comes most to mind. Now,
the truck in the tunnel in France is also a weird one.
Yes.
You seen that one?
I don't think I've seen that one. I have seen one where somebody's turning and literally a car comes out of nowhere because nobody was coming down the street, and boom, there's that car. It seemed to come out of nowhere. Very, very strange. With time travel, do you... And this is going to go with not only with time travel, but also the human interactions that you've dealt with. Do you feel like our government possibly maybe has this technology and they're doing stuff along, whether in tandem with or in relationship with the visitors? Or do you think that we might have some type of technology that mankind is playing with that the public is not privy to?
I don't know. Maybe. I know of a few secret technologies. They don't interest me very much, frankly. Mm-hmm. The whole government thing, it causes me almost to roll my eyes back in my head with boredom, because I think that the close encounter witnesses collectively know far, far more than the government does. I don't think the government's position in this is important.
Okay, that's fair enough. There's one other thing that I wanted to ask about in regards to your book, The Key. Fascinating book. I really highly recommend for people to read this because it is certainly a much different encounter that you had with the key than in most of your other books where you've had encounters with the visitors. You've had encounter with a person. And this gentleman, as you call him, the master of the key, when he appeared in your hotel room in Toronto, and then had this very strange conversation with him. Do you think that he was, because I know he had a lot of cryptic responses to some of your questions, especially in regards to who he possibly could have been, including in the discussion of intelligent machines. For whatever reason, it popped into my head the other day that it almost seems like it could be related to what a lot of people refer to as the Men in Black phenomenon. Could he have been, do you feel he was a real person, maybe with a special knowledge, or do you feel that there was something very much different about him?
Well, it's hard to answer that question. He certainly was affable enough. He wasn't like this sort of sinister image of the Men in Black. He seemed real to me that night, but the next morning I called Anne from the hotel room and told her never to let me decide it hadn't happened. So on some level, he was unusual. There was something about him that had struck me as being unusual enough to where I would decide eventually that this was all a dream and it had never happened. Otherwise, I wouldn't have called her. So, and, looking back on it now, I just can't answer the question in all honesty as to whether or not he was physically there. I do know that night I obviously perceived him as such, and the next morning was concerned enough about it to call Anne and get her to remind me that whenever I decided he hadn't been real, that I had called her and told her he was. So, it's like all of these things. The level in which they're real, if you concretize it, you've lost it. You made a mistake, and it's a matter of preserving the indeterminacy by not looking at it in such a way that it coalesces into a false belief or a belief. I don't think there's any point in that. I don't believe in the master of the key being either real, a fabrication, or something from something connected with the universe in a way that we don't understand. I just leave it in question. When I say fabrication, I mean imagination. I would never lie about any of this stuff. Never.
But a lot of it, there is a sense of unreality when you have some of these experiences that maybe they don't feel like, and I've heard this from other experiencers, that it may not exactly be happening on a conscious level as we understand it. Now, that's not saying that it's happening in the mind, but again, it's here we get to the word reality and what we think of what is reality. Is we think of our consciousness, our conscious waking thoughts of going to work and driving a car and eating dinner or whatnot. That's our conscious reality. Or is in fact this the dream, and what's happening on our subconscious or on the dream state, maybe that's reality.
When my son was 7, he had an encounter that I record at the beginning of my second book, Transformation. After that, he came in to breakfast in the morning with a little piece of paper in his hand and handed it to us. It was something he had written. It was the phrase, "Reality is God's dream." And I said to him, "Who is God?" And he smiled with his big 7-year-old grin and said, "We are." Therein lies a problem. And the problem has a great deal to do with the question you just asked and why I can't answer it clearly. Mm-hmm. He was subsequently has forgotten, or says he has forgotten, all of this stuff, and he's living in a normal life without any of this. It's not in his life at all. And I think that's just as well, because it interrupts your life profoundly. And I've often thought to myself, what would my life have been if it hadn't been this? I wouldn't trade it for anything, but it's very hard. It's really hard on many different levels. The social level with the bores and the idiots, and the personal level with the sneering friends, I call them. And there's various sinister, sort of shadowy groups I'm forced to interact with at times that I don't enjoy at all. And then there are the visitors and the wonders that they bring me. I'm very used to them now in certain senses, and can interact in a way that is very productive for me. So on balance, I'm glad I have this life. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And I'm very grateful to them for continuing to take an interest in me. As improbable as that seems to me, it is true.
The relationship that you had with the visitors changed over a period of time from the direct contacts that you had in the beginning, from when you started to remember from December of 1985 for a few years there, and then it seemed to change form. I don't want to say it stopped or went away, but
it did change form for a while, but now it's back to the same thing, kind of contacts it was at the beginning.
Really? Okay, so they are fully back in your life like they were back then.
Well, with the difference that they no longer restrict themselves to the kind of formula of linear experience. It's a much richer and more complex experience now than it was then, because I understand it better. It probably was then too, but I just didn't understand it. So I filtered out the parts I didn't understand. I don't need to filter that out, I don't think, anymore, though I could be filtering things out. I don't know. But this is a very much richer experience, and it's caused the things like the barrier between the living and the dead to sort of fall away, and the ability to move through space and time in a whole new way is there. And
what about the fear that you felt on those first initial contacts where you were feeling such incredible fear and terror? Has that transformed? Do you still feel trepidation at all when you start having these encounters, or have you become...
I'll tell you when I do. I don't feel fear when I'm completely invested in the physical, even if they show up. I don't feel fear, and I know I can exchange with them in a way that is reliable. But when I go into my inner self, and therefore also out of my body, I feel a vulnerability. And that is something I'm working on, because it's an illusion. It's not a real vulnerability at all. And I think I was probably more vulnerable in the physical when I was going out in the woods at night. I mean, given what was happening in the neighborhood, they might have been just aching to just suck me dry, and they didn't do it because they wanted an ally who would later be a form of bait.
You had mentioned in the book, in Supernatural, and then after this, Jeffrey, I haven't forgotten you. I want to bring something up here with you, but let me ask this one last question here.
Who's Jeffrey?
Yeah, who? Huh?
Oh, you mean Jeff?
Jeff.
Of course, Jeff.
Yeah, I keep slipping into the
Jeffrey.
formal.
He's not a Jeffrey. You'd have to meet him to know this.
Okay. With you mentioned in the book that these walks through the woods, and you were feeling pulled to go out there, and you were testing yourself and trying to experience, and it almost seems like it was an encouragement for you to take those steps and move forward. But there was the one time you mentioned going out there and you felt like there was something just beyond the edge of the trees, that there was something else out there following you that had almost not an evil intent, but possibly a dangerous intent to you. And it's
many times I felt that. I think what you're talking about is the sense of, I had a feeling once out there that there was something that was just incredibly evil. Mm-hmm. And it scared the hell out of me.
And you turned back.
Oh, I turned back many times, and I did turn back then, yes.
But you felt like in the book, and maybe I misread it wrong, but in the book you felt like that they were testing you for something, but you...
They were always testing.
I'm sorry about
they
that.
don't like this. We better change the subject. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, that was Bruce.
Okay, listen. The thing I used to do that was cool, and that was it really cemented the relationship, was I would go out, and you'd go up a long rise, and then there was a cliff. At the bottom of this cliff, when it was running, there was a thing called a kill, a little stream. Mm-hmm. And in the cliff, there was a cave. And some very old artifacts had been found in that cave years before. And it wasn't a deep cave. It was just a little cul-de-sac in the rock, about 10 or 12 feet deep. But if I went in that, I was about 1.5 miles out away from any human habitation in any direction. I was completely helpless in there, completely vulnerable. And when I turned off my light, there was no light at all. You couldn't see anything. That was the place where my relationship with them changed, and they began to treat me with some respect.
Jeffrey, let me ask you, based on what Whitley mentioned with his son, and I feel this is a perfect question for you considering your background, that the son mentioned that we were God is us, or we are God. How do you interpret that from your position?
Well, that's standard mystical philosophy in a lot of religions. It's not surprising at all to me that he'd say that. I mean, one of the things that I kept thinking about listening to your conversation with Whitley about time and about time travel and about Whitley's experiences of being many people at once is that, again, these are just really classical notions of reincarnation. I mean, what you're really talking about is the soul. And in all kinds of reincarnation traditions in Asia, say, India or Tibet or China, reincarnation is a way of talking about being many people at once, essentially. And I think one of the reasons, again, that we were so puzzled by so many of these experiences is that fundamentally they're about the soul. And we no longer believe in a soul. We've lost the language, we've lost the sensibility, and so we invoke physics or something. But in fact, what we're talking about is the soul. And in a lot of these religious traditions, particularly in Asia, again, the soul is identical with the Godhead. There is no distinction between the human spirit and the divine, none at all. So the human being, if he or she's identified completely with the immortal soul, can indeed say, I am God, because they truly are in that system. So in some way, Whitley's son was sort of intuiting a kind of natural mystical identity between the soul and the divine that we find all over the world to this day.
That seems to me, in my mind, to be part of the problem. Is our Western culture in general is a part of the problem, because we are trained from a very early age to look at the world from an analytical, separated perspective, that we're not a part of this world. We are in this world, but the world is separate and we are us. And instead of being interconnected, Native American cultures, many of them and many other Aboriginal cultures around the world have more of a nature-based view of reality. They look at themselves as being a part of the earth, a part of the world, a part of the universe, where Western people, we just seem to separate ourselves from everything. There's us, okay, up there in heaven, there's God, there's the devil down here, there's this and that, but we are all separated from everything. And I think that's what's keeping us from evolving, because Western culture has dominated the planet in the last century. Has dominated the planet in the last century, and it seems to be making it even more difficult for us to be able to commune, I guess, to use your title of your book, Whitley, to commune with these forces and these intelligences the way that maybe we were meant to be.
Well, sure. And of course, the problem is that, Western science and technology gets so many things right and gives us so many things, so many precious things that we want and we wouldn't think of giving up, like anesthesia or, modern communications like we're on now. So it's not as if the scientific, the Western worldview is wrong. It's that it's incomplete, and it's that we've lopped off a big part of ourselves so that we can specialize in these sort of analytical, mechanical, and technological skills. But we've lost something too. And other cultures, of course, specialize on the soul or specialize on magical practice, and they sacrifice other things. So there's no perfect culture here. We want to be certainly critical of our own culture, but we don't want to pretend that some other culture has it all right, because they don't. I study cultures for a living, and I can tell you there's no such thing as a perfect culture. They all do some things well, and they do other things not just poorly, but horrifically, including ours. So that's sort of the dilemma of being a human being. is that, you come into the world as an infant and you're literally capable of speaking any language on the planet. You're capable of becoming any culture, but you can't, of course, be all cultures. You have to be socialized into one, and so you lose all those language capacities as your brain and your lips and your tongue focus in on one language. So that's just part of being human. But I think when we run into somebody like Whitley here, who's had a set of remarkable experiences that make good sense in another cultural framework that seem anomalous or strange in ours, I mean, this is where we have to stop and think about that.
Where do you, and Jeffrey, this is for you, in your time with Whitley and working with him and writing this book, Supernatural, do you see us as a species being able to move forward, or are we in danger of falling very much behind? Do you see us being able to, and with the interaction that Whitley's had with the visitors and seeming to push our consciousness, do we have the ability now to break free of these limitations, moving forward and expanding our awareness and consciousness? Or are we in danger of falling back into a new dark ages?
Well, I mean, I think it's probably a little of both. I'm a historian. That's my profession. And as Whitley mentioned earlier, history is a very tricky thing. We assume that history is this linear line with dates, and we all know what the story was. We had, as you said, we just had the Dark Ages, and then we had the Renaissance, and then the Reformation, and then the Enlightenment, and then the Industrial Age, and now we're in the modern period. Well, that's a story. That's not what happened. That's a story that we tell by selecting a few elements out of trillions and trillions and weaving them into a narrative that we call history. But we can look back at those same elements, those same facts, and we can weave a different history with a different moral. And so in terms of the question of are we evolving or are we falling back, really what you're asking, Mark, is what kind of story should we be telling ourselves? How should we be putting the elements of history together to move forward or fall back? I think we want to think of ourselves as moving forward, and I think in many ways we are. But I don't think we should be naive about that and just assume that the story we're telling ourselves is the only story that can be told. And again, that's where I think these abduction events are so important. It's because they mess up our story, and they force us to rethink it. So I would just be really careful about any kind of simple, we're moving forward, we're evolving. We were once naive and primitive, and now we're modern and great. I'm very suspicious of that narrative.
Oh, I am too. In fact, I've really been leaning towards the idea that perhaps our existence is much older than modern science or archaeology will have us believe. And we may have been looking at many, many different times where humanity or a version of it has been on this planet, has reached a high level of advancement, evolution, technology, only to be knocked back by natural disaster, by man-made disaster, and we start all over again from scratch. We could have had many different cycles. A good example would be the stories that come from Atlantis and Lemuria and these other advanced ancient civilizations to the advanced cultures in India and I can't even say it tonight. Mahabharata. Okay, I'm not even going to forget it. The Indian epics. and talking about these great, societies and these flying machines and different technologies that seem to be here many years ago. And a lot of people, what's popular is, of course, the Ancient Aliens television series, and people think, yes, aliens came down and gave all of this information to mankind. But I don't quite buy that as much anymore. While we might have had some influence by the visitors or other beings, I have a feeling that we as entities, as an intelligence, may have been here for much, much, much longer and have gone through many different cycles. And these last several thousand years is just the latest cycle in our existence. What do you think to that, Jeffrey?
Well, I think that's another story. I think that's a story that people have put together by selecting a very few archaeological facts or elements, and then they put those elements together to form a story that's different than the one that professional archaeology or anthropology gives us. So again, it's not that I have the correct story, Mark. I'm not claiming to have the right story. I'm trying to just suggest that we're always writing ourselves. We're always telling another story, and we need to be more aware of that, and we need to tell a story that is more adequate to what we know about the world and ourselves today. I'll give you a simple example. 1859, Darwin's Origin of Species comes out. It was devastating, absolutely devastating to a lot of evangelical Christians in the English-speaking world. And the reason it was so devastating was because it gave another very plausible story for essentially the creation of the world and the human species that was completely different than the biblical story. And I think we're always in a similar situation. We're finding out more and more about the world, more and more about ourselves, more and more about the human genome. I think we're going to have a lot of Darwinian-like revolutions in our thinking over the next couple hundred years. I don't think we're done discovering new things about the human species. And I think as we do that, our stories are going to change quite dramatically. So again, being a scholar of religion is not about pushing a particular religion or pushing a particular story. It's about making people aware that we're all telling stories and that we're all living in a story that we call a religion or a culture. And so that's a tough thing to do sometimes.
Well, one thing that I've had the privilege of with this show for the past 5 years is having people like yourselves on, and I have learned so much, and I continue to learn as we go. And the concepts that we talk about here tonight, you've, Jeffrey, especially this last comment you've made about our stories, even that's opening my eyes and making me think in new and different ways. And, between yourself and Whitley, if that is the goal or one of the goals that you're looking to achieve, is to just get the stories out there so people can think on it and expand their awareness of our reality, or what we think is our reality, of our existence, then you're doing a marvelous job, because we need to question ourselves. We need to question everything that we're being taught, what we think we know in reality, and be open to the fact that we don't have the answers. We don't know it all. We are constantly evolving and learning, and that's what I want to do on this show. Is I love talking with guests such as yourself, because I look at this for me as I'm the student. I'm having a learning experience, and I try to take something away from the conversations that we have here. Now, the book, the Paranormal, the Supernatural, was just released not long ago. Whitley, where can people find that book?
That's a good question. Probably safest to look for it online on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or somewhere.
I got my copy on Kindle, so you can also get it as an ebook format as well. And are both of you, are you doing any types of speaking experiences or conferences to talk about this subject further? Or are you just doing the radio shows at this point in time?
It's radio shows, as far as I know.
Yeah, I routinely lecture mostly at universities around the U.S. and in Europe, but none in the near future. We both have very active websites. That's another place people can go, Mark.
And Jeffrey, can you tell people what your website is?
It's just kripel.rice.edu. So kripal.rice.edu. And all my books and projects are summarized there, listed there.
And Whitley, your website, which I'm very familiar with, unknowncountry.com.
Yes.
And you also have your own radio show that you do, Dreamland.
Yeah, that's right. Dreamland is on Unknown Country, and so is Jeremy Vaney's The Experience, which is another show. It's more conversational, and he mostly talks to close encounter witnesses, and it's quite good.
Well, one final question. Now that the book is out, what do you want the end result to be at this point? What are you hoping to achieve with this book out there now?
Well, the point of the book is not to push another story, but to push the conversation up another level and get people to think about the stories we're telling about these sorts of experiences, and to provide the conversation with a lot more nuance and a lot more sophistication than it's had up to this point. Whitley, is that fair?
Yeah, I think so.
Fantastic. Well, Whitley and Jeff, I just want to thank you both for coming on the show tonight. It's been wonderful talking with both of you. And Bruce Pearson has asked to send his apologies for the technical issues he had on his end, and he wants to wish you both well. Irene, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a great show. I'm all ears.
Well, again, thank you, gentlemen, for coming on, and we really loved having you, and we would love to have you come back again sometime in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Irene.
Thank you.
and thank you, everyone, for listening to another edition of Unknown Origins Radio. You can listen live on Wednesday nights here on unknownoriginsradio.com and on Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time on the Dark Matter Digital Network. Thank you for listening, everybody, and have a great night. Irene, take care.
Okay.
So you are a professional plumber, yes? But do you have professional website? Not so much. Try Ionos. Its turbocharged AI power works super fast to bring your WordPress website to life and deliver top-of-the-drawer results every time. And its clever auto updates do all the hard work of maintaining your site, so you can get on with maintaining your business. How's that for nice? Try Ionos, your digital partner at ionos.co.uk.